Good evening and welcome to Story Hour. I'm tonight's host, Laura Blackwell. My co-host, Daniel Marcus, started Story Hour over a year ago to help us all just gather around a virtual campfire and share stories. So cozy, I just come back every Wednesday, and a lot of us do. Welcome back to those of you returning, and welcome to those of you joining us for the first time. We have two writers, and they're reading for their same nonprofit. Are Ellen Denham and doing something a little unusual this time, Daniel Marcus. If you are fortunate enough to help others during this time, please consider a donation to tonight's featured nonprofit, the ACLU. Both Ellen Denham and Daniel Marcus are reading for the ACLU tonight. The American Civil Liberties Union was founded in 1920 and is our nation's guardian of liberty. Who works in the courts, legislatures, and communities and preserve the individual rights and liberties guaranteed for all people in this country by the Constitution and laws of the United States. You can learn more about the ACLU at aclu.org. If you're here on Zoom, feel free to leave your camera on. It's really nice for our readers to actually make eye contact with people during the readings, and chime in on the text chat on the right if you like. If you're joining us on Facebook, thank you. We're so glad you're here, but we may not be able to keep up with your conversation right away. So our first reader tonight is Ellen Denham. Ellen Denham is a multidisciplinary performing artist, director, and writer who directs the opera program and teaches voice at Texas A&M University, Corpus Christi. That's a little bit of a tongue twister, isn't it? A graduate of the Odyssey Writing Workshop, she has been published in Daily Science Fiction, newmyths.com, and the Women Destroyed science fiction issue of Lightspeed. Not content to keep her writing and performing life separate, Ellen likes to hang out in the dark alleys where artistic genres and performing life and where artistic genres and disciplines intersect. This includes writing works for performance, such as the children's opera Olivia's Ocean, commissioned by the Hart Institute for Gulf of Mexico Studies. Ellen, thank you for joining us tonight.
Thanks, I'm thrilled to be here, and I'm going to be reading my story, The Golden Larynx, which was originally published in Gears and Levers 3 that came out in, I believe, 2013. So here is...
Feel free to drop the link to that later.
Sure. So here is The Golden Larynx. When my voice teacher, Melisande Rossi, died of a fever, the devotees of the Vienne Opera were devastated, none more than myself. I was 16, and I must have cried every day for weeks. Never again would she perform the role she had made famous, the exiled queen of Athalan, the leopard-headed goddess Nyla, the consumptive courtesan Meline, or the madwoman Carlotta. She breathed her last on the very day she was to have originally appeared in the first opera to use the latest technology. The Thunder Run had been converted to steam power in order to increase the number of cannonballs that would run the length of the proscenium to produce sound for the storm scene. Her personal physician, Dr. Dulcamara, claimed he would preserve her larynx so that another generation of opera devotees might enjoy her dulcet tones. Though he had collaborated with Kapellmeister Heinz on building a steam-powered pipe organ, making a dead larynx sing was entirely different. Surely his scheme was an empty boast. My mother was a costumer at the opera house, her eyes nearly gone bad from all the hand-stitching until they brought her a new lock-stitch machine from America. Mother had been close to Madame Rossi, which is probably the only reason the great diva had accepted me as a student. I was mediocre at best, with a smallish voice, but I had big dreams. My teacher was kind. When I asked if she thought I had the talent to be an opera singer, she always said, "We shall see, dear. The voice is still growing." She would purse her full lips and study me as if I were a painting on an easel. I always wished for lips like hers, You do have a good sense of pitch. If you practice hard at reading music, you may be ready to sing for Herr Speed this autumn. Perhaps he could use another soprano in the chorus. A couple of the ladies are getting on in years. Can you dance? To my young mind, this meant I was surely her anointed successor. I dreamed of having her teach me to perform that heart-wrenching operatic scream in Carlotta's death scene, just the way that she had. I was almost as tall as Rossi, and found myself imitating her mannerisms. I began wearing my hair swept up and swathing my throat in gauzy scarves, in imitation of my famous teacher, when I should have paid more attention to what she tried to teach me. About a month after Madame Rossi's death, when the spring leaves were just beginning to show on the great plane trees out, all a Twitter to tell me that Dr. Dulcamara would be performing a demonstration of his new invention that very evening for a select audience of patrons and financiers. He'd done it. He claimed that Rossi's voice would be heard again. I might have wondered if it was right to make a dead voice box sing, or perhaps I didn't think of it at all, caught up in ghoulish fascination. Mother and I rushed to the theater and spied from the wings. Several important-looking personages stood upon a bare stage, talking in low murmurs. Monsieur Chauvin, the old impresario who had run the opera house since my mother was young, said a few words, and the guests applauded politely. The doctor, a slight man with an impressive mustache, wheeled a golden cart onto the stage. Two people followed. First was Hans Braun, the symphony's timpanist, balding and red-faced. He winked at me. Second came Anneliese Zilber, who had been the first trombonist, until a jaw injury from a carriage accident rendered her incapable of playing. Though she was a striking woman, her smile was now crooked. Dr. Dulcamara spoke for a while, but I didn't listen. Madame Zilber and Herr Braun stood a couple of steps behind him, looking important, though I hadn't guessed their purpose. I couldn't take my eyes off the golden cart. What did a larynx look like? I placed a hand upon my own throat and felt the bump of cartilage. How strange to think that part of Melisande Rossi was there, underneath the velvet cloth. If she were in heaven looking down, or a ghost floating about the opera house, what would she think? Encased, ladies and gentlemen, in a thin, flexible layer of pure gold, all except the vocal folds themselves, which must remain well oiled. The doctor removed the cloth with a flourish. I leaned as close as I dared. A small, roughly triangular object of gleaming gold perched inside a glass canister, with a tube descending from it into the cart. A bell like a French horn's, made of rubbery-looking material, extended from the top of the canister. I swallowed, aware of my own larynx as it bobbed up and down. A woman in the crowd fainted in a rustle of skirts and had to be carried past us by her escort. "Miraculous," my mother whispered, clutching my arm. "Herr Braun and Madame Zilber have worked together all week to learn to operate this magnificent voice, and I think you will be pleased with the results." The doctor nodded, as if in agreement with himself. "As they continue their work, they will be able to perform more challenging pieces. But for today's demonstration, they will assist Madame Rossi in a performance of The First Blush of Springtime." "Assist Madame Rossi," my mother said. "How dare he?" She choked off the last word, silencing herself by force. Her fingernails bit into my arm. I knew what she must have been thinking. That golden object was not Madame Rossi. Imagining the doctor cutting into her throat, I felt a momentary wave of nausea and closed my eyes until it passed. Nevertheless, I wanted to hear the voice. I wanted it more than anything. Herr Braun gripped a bellows on the side of the cart, and Madame Zilber placed her hand on the bell. She was doing something with her other hand, perhaps manipulating tiny levers, but I wasn't close enough to tell. Their heads moved in time to an unseen beat, and then the first sound came forth, the lovely ascending scale I knew so well. The First Blush of Springtime was one of the first songs that Madame Rossi had assigned to me. The voice sang without words, mostly on an ah vowel, though sometimes when Madame Silber squeezed the bell, it came out more like an ooh. The sound was unmistakably human, and sent the same vibrations through me that Melisande Rossi's voice had done when alive. I am certain that I wept, we all did, to hear a sound that might have been lost forever. As Mother and I clutched each other and dabbed our eyes with handkerchiefs, the doctor posed beside his invention for a photographer, a wide grin etched upon his narrow face. The acrid smoke of the magnesium flash drifted upward through the catwalks above the stage. The invited guests began to leave, murmuring excitedly. Franco Tomasi, the flamboyant tenor who had often performed opposite Madame Rossi, stormed past us, his coat extending on either side like bat's wings. "They've turned her into an organ pipe," he said to his companion. "I'm seeing my lawyer right now to make sure I sing my last note while I'm still alive." I pulled my shawl around my shoulders, my desire to hear the voice now seeming morbid. The doctor had claimed that Rossi consented to this on her deathbed, but now I wondered, would she really have wanted this? Would anyone? Melisande Rossi's first role after her death was the one that had made her famous, the Queen of Athalan, exiled for her dead husband's crime, though she herself was innocent. Opening night sold out within hours. The stagehands were used to having me watch from the wings, as long as I stayed out of their way. I had thought maybe they would dress an actress up to mime the role of the Queen, while Herr Braun and Madame Silber rolled the cart behind her. But the cart itself was swathed in royal purple, and rolled about to the places on stage where Madame Rossi would have stood. Hans Braun simply wore his tails, and Anneliese Silber her black concert gown. In the opening scene, when the maidens bring flowers to the Queen, the cart was rolled center stage. All the chorus women curtsied before it, leaving silk blossoms at its wheels. Everyone sang and interacted with the cart as if it were a person. The sound that came from the Golden Larynx, though quite lovely, lacked the warmth and emotion for which Madame Rossi had been known. I missed hearing the words. Yet I supposed it was better than nothing, better than having that voice silent forever. I could imagine what she looked like singing the role, her tall figure robed in rich purple, her elaborate eye makeup, the sympathetic curve of her smile as she embraced the maidens. I had seen it many times, and had hoped to learn the role myself. No, that was frivolous dreaming. My high notes would never come close to the beautiful shimmering quality of hers. Finally, I closed my eyes and tried to see her in my mind as I listened. "You must wonder how it works," a tobacco-scented voice whispered at my ear. I opened my eyes to see Dr. Dulcamara standing beside me, his dark hair and mustache oiled. "Are you an aspiring singer?" he asked. "Yes," I said, and instantly thought I should have said no. I mean I had some lessons with Madame Rossi." "Splendid." He placed his hands together with the fingers steepled. "Then you will understand. Hans there controls the air pressure with the bellows. It's a difficult task. He can't just pump away like a choir boy at the pipe organ, but must deliver the precise amount of pressure at the right time, like a singer would with his or her diaphragm. Do you follow me?" He pressed a hand against my stomach, as Madame Rossi had often done while instructing me on breath control, but with him it felt much more awkward. "Could it be controlled by steam power?" I asked, more to change the subject than out of curiosity. The steam-powered Thunder Run was not to be unveiled yet, so as not to compete with the doctor's marvelous machine. "Of course not." Dr. Dulcamara removed his hand from my stomach. "A steam-powered organ works because the pressure is constant. Could you make a steam-powered tuba? No, it could not control the pressure as precisely as a player. At least not yet. Maybe someday." Our conversation paused as we both listened to the climactic notes of the Queen's aria, after which the audience cheered and applauded vigorously. The curtain fell, and Herr Braun and Madame Silber rolled the cart past us off stage. The doctor took my arm and escorted me away from the stage to make room for the scene change. "A little more oil there, Anna," Dr. Dolcamara said as stagehands bustled past us, wheeling the parts of the castle off stage and trees on stage for the forest scene. "The last note sounded a bit dry." He turned back to me with an exaggerated smile, revealing horse-like teeth. "Can you understand what Anna does with the bell?" I pondered this. I had seen her use her hand to manipulate the flexible bell coming from the larynx, as one might the shape of one's own mouth, to alter the tone color. "Placement of the tone?" I replied. "Very good," the doctor said. "What about her other hand?" I thought about it, but had to confess that I did not know. "I didn't expect you would," he replied. "Most singers have little idea what goes on inside their throats. She manipulates the tension of the vocal folds, using specially designed slides to change the positions of the cartilages. That controls the pitch." I nodded. "That's a little like what she used to do with her trombone," I said. "Clever girl!" Dr. Dolcamara took my hand and pumped it up and down excitedly. "If you don't succeed in singing, I may have a job for you later on. The great singers can't live forever. Don't you think Franz is looking a little peaked?" Herr Franz was the baritone, famous for playing villains like the Queen's deceitful older brother. He stood in the wings downstage from us, bouncing on the balls of his feet with his arms clasped behind him as he waited for his entrance. Though well into his 60s, he looked perfectly vigorous to me. My skin prickled as I understood what the doctor was suggesting. Perhaps I didn't have the talent to be a singer, but I may yet have a stage career, pulling slides and playing someone else's voice. I drew myself up to my full height, almost even with the doctor, and did my best imitation of Madame Rossi's haughty glare. "I aspire to be a singer." "Do you now?" The doctor looked me up and down through narrowed eyes, as if taking my measure for a dress. "A thought just occurred to me." He waggled a finger at me, mouth open, as intending to say more, but just then the whir of a pulley signaled the curtain rising on scene 2. The orchestra launched into the Villainous Brothers theme. The doctor rested a hairy hand briefly upon my arm. "I must get Madame Rossi ready for her next scene. Find me in the green room at intermission." I tried to tell myself that I was silly to be afraid of Dr. Dolcamara, but I couldn't help imagining him with Madame Rossi's dead body, cutting into that throat. Still, I was curious enough to seek him out. The green room was full of black-clad orchestra players clumped in groups like crows, and the chorus of soldiers, cheeks rouged, some still waiting to be wigged. My mother would usually have been in Madame Rossi's dressing room changing her costume, but I wasn't sure where she was now. Dr. Dolcamara stood in the corner with his back to me, talking to Monsieur Chauvin. The impresario was a little man, stooped with age, but his piercing blue eyes missed nothing. I was still half afraid of him, since he had caught me climbing on the tower from the Act 1 set of The Prophetess. That had been years ago. I wondered if he remembered. "You mean Leonora's girl, don't you?" Monsieur Chauvin said to Dr. Dolcamara. "Leonora was my mother." I didn't catch the doctor's reply. I shrank back a step. "She has the height of the coloring," Monsieur Chauvin said. "But I wonder, can she handle?" His eyes fell on me. "Lily, come here. We were just talking about you." He remembered my name. I approached timidly. "Hello, sir." "You studied with Madame Rossi, is that correct?" he asked. "Yes, sir." "Stand up straight, girl, and let me look at you." I did, and he adjusted his spectacles on his beak of a nose and squinted up to look at me. When had I gotten so tall? Dr. Dolcamara's lips twitched up beneath his mustache. "Didn't I tell you? Tall as Rossi, and since she studied with her, she could certainly copy some of her mannerisms." Monsieur Chauvin snapped his gnarled fingers at me. "Cast your eyes heavenward and place a hand on your bosom, like Rossi as Maline." Maline was one of the roles I longed to perform, with a sustained high note at the end, just before the courtesan succumbed to her illness. I did my best impression. "Good, good. Now the Queen ordering her maidservants away. No, Extend your arm more forcefully. There. That's it. The old man put me through a few more poses, then chortled like a little boy and clapped his hands together. Marvelous. I think I can use you. See me tomorrow morning to discuss the terms of the contract. Thank you, sir, I said to his back as he and the doctor walked away through the sea of instrumentalists. Dr. Dolcamara turned and winked at me. But, I said to no one, you haven't heard me sing. Of course they didn't want me to sing. At first I didn't want any part of it, but my mother talked sense into me, as she called it, and coached me so I knew what to ask for when negotiating the contract. Think of it as an opportunity to learn the business, she said. Make sure you get voice lessons as part of the deal. If you can already act the roles, you can keep working to learn to sing them. Mother insisted on coming with me. She was dressed far too flamboyantly in a ruffled purple gown and matching hat, and had me wear a blue silk gown that had belonged to Madame Rossi. It was way too loose, but she'd taken in the bodice and added one of the new exaggerated bustles to round out my adolescent figure. I wore my hair piled high on my head like the great diva herself. My footsteps and my mother's were silent upon the plush rug in Monsieur Chauvin's upstairs office. Though I'd practically grown up in the opera house, I'd never been inside this room. One wall was nearly filled with tall windows, letting in the morning sun to make sharp angles on the floor. Bookshelves filled the opposite wall, above which hung paintings of the earlier opera stars and daguerreotypes of the more recent ones, like Rossi. The impresario sat behind a massive mahogany desk. Dr. Dolcamara sat in a straight chair to his right. I wish the doctor wasn't there. Perhaps he expected a commission for discovering me. It's good to see you. The skin around Monsieur Chauvin's eyes crinkled into tiny pleats as he stood to take my hand. We'll go over the contract, and I think you will be pleased. I sat with my hands in my lap and listened as he read the terms. I'd be an apprentice artist for 2 months, paid at the usual rate, and given instruction in dance as well as private coachings with Monsieur Chauvin himself to learn to act the roles. The roles Madame Rossi had performed. If I proved satisfactory, I'd be hired on as a regular company member, though paid at the rate of comprimaria rather than lead roles. This seems fair, Monsieur Chauvin said, as you will not actually be singing the roles. She will need voice lessons, my mother chimed in before I could speak. You understand, Dr. Dolcamara enunciated, as if explaining to someone who was stupid, that she won't be singing the roles. If I'm to mime the roles, I need to be able to sing them, I said, surprising myself with a firmness in my voice. I need to know how much breath each phrase takes and how to shape the vowels to better look as if I'm singing. Dr. Dolcamara grinned like a shark. Didn't I tell you she was clever? Of course she should have voice lessons. Do you suppose Madame Abendroth might come out of retirement to teach her, considering the unusual circumstances? I gasped. Madame Abendroth had been Rossi's own teacher, a formidable woman known mostly as a composer, a lady of sorrows, about the heroine Carlotta's descent into madness. Carlotta was Rossi's first leading role. The doctor leaned expectantly toward the impresario, eyebrows raised. I wasn't sure why he had taken such an interest. Having me mime the roles would take attention away from his invention, wouldn't it? Monsieur Chauvin drummed his fingers upon the table, his mouth pressed into a flat line. The circumstances are unusual, to be sure. I will speak with Madame Abendroth. Not a week later, everything was arranged. I'd never before been so fussed over. Private coachings with Monsieur Chauvin, daily ballet lessons. I was terribly inflexible, but told I moved well. And lessons with Madame Abendroth on Tuesdays and Thursdays. She terrified me. Dr. Dolcamara escorted me in his own carriage to my first lesson with her. I wanted to flinch from his hand on my arm, but I didn't dare. I prayed that he wouldn't try to take any indecent liberties and wondered what on earth I would do if he did. Thus far he had been a gentleman, but I still didn't relish being alone with him. A maid let us in. Madame Abendroth's drawing room was filled with ancient yellowed lace, adorning the mantel and the piano. small round doilies draped over the backs of chairs. The grande dame hefted her considerable bulk from an upholstered chair to cross the room. She peered at me through small spectacles. Her face wasn't as lined as I would have expected of a woman who had to be at least 70. Well, what have you prepared, child? I can sing The First Blush of Springtime, I said. Very well, she said, gliding to the piano bench. I had never seen such a large woman move with such grace. My voice shook as I sang for her. I was constantly aware of the doctor's gaze. He sat chin in hand, his eyes intent, examining me like a specimen. It's not much of a voice, Madame Abendroth said, as soon as I stopped singing, but your intonation is good. That is something to work with. Dr. Dulcamara practically leapt from his chair. No need to worry about the tone quality, Madame. Work with her on placement and support, and the tone will take care of itself. She peered at him over her spectacles. I believe I know more about vocal technique than you, young man. I nearly snickered to hear her call him young. Please keep quiet while we work, or you may wait outside. Dr. Dulcamara kept very quiet after that. The first thing Madame Abendroth did was make me hold a rope with both hands while I vocalized. Plant your feet, girl, and don't move. She pulled the other end hard, and I nearly lost my balance. Melisande didn't teach you a thing about support, did she? After 2 months of hard work, Monsieur Chauvin deemed me ready to perform the role of Carlotta. You have that desperate, mad look down so well. Never forget how much one can convey with the eyes. He tapped a finger to the wrinkled bag beneath his own eye. I found it fitting I should perform Rossi's first leading role, but I'd always hoped to sing it, not simply mime it and mouth the words with her larynx traveling behind me on the stage. Not that acting the role wasn't challenging. I had never realized how much went into an opera besides singing. I couldn't let my concentration slip for an instant. I was nervous before my first entrance, when Carlotta is seen visiting her mother's grave. But once I got out on stage, I relaxed into the role, moving to the sound of Madame Rossi's voice behind me. Yes, the cart was still quite visible on stage, which must have pleased Dr. Dulcamara, but his reasoning made sense. Herr Braun and Madame Zilber needed to see my movements in order to coordinate the sound. I had grown accustomed to taking exaggerated breaths that they could see, as if I were really about to sing. The storm at the end of Scene 1 shook the stage with a rumble of cannonballs traversing the thunder run overhead. The steam power had at least doubled the effect, making the audience murmur and gasp. I did not have to pretend to be frightened when the storm scares Carlotta away from the grave. I half expected a bolt of lightning to split the stage. In the last scene of the opera, wig disheveled and my body draped in artfully arranged burlap, I mimed and mouthed the lyrics to Carlotta's last aria. I longed so much to sing along with Madame Rossi's larynx that I think I did sing a few notes very softly, an octave lower, before I caught myself. As the last note died away, I held aloft the shining knife to plunge it into my midsection. The knife, of course, retracted, simply an illusion. My tears were real. I had performed my first leading role in an opera without singing a note. My performance, along with that of Madame Rossi's larynx, received rave reviews. I couldn't have been more miserable, though perhaps I should have appreciated the opportunity for what it was. I was determined to prove to Monsieur Chauvin that I could sing the roles. Even if I wasn't ready to sing Carlotta or the Queen, surely I could be the maid who sings a short aria in Act 1 of The Exile of Athalan. It didn't go too high. For an entire season, I mimed the roles that Madame Rossi had sung. People came from all over to see the performances, though I knew they weren't coming to see me. Everyone was curious about Madame Rossi's larynx singing on after her death. I was just window dressing. Spring became summer, and then the leaves on the plane trees at last began to wither as autumn breezes came from the mountains. I sang on my own time and during my lessons with Madame Abendroth. Dr. Dulcamara often accompanied me to my lessons and encouraged me even when Madame didn't. Quite possibly I had misjudged him. I begged him to speak to Monsieur Chauvin on my behalf, to arrange for me to sing for the impresario. At last, Chauvin agreed. Madame Abendroth was skeptical. I'm not sure you're ready. When do you think I'll be ready? I asked. She pursed her lips, considering. Well, frankly, never. I suppose now is as good a time as any. Her words stung, but I was determined to prove her wrong. I could sing and I knew it. Dr. Dulcamara came with me the morning of my audition, offering words of encouragement before I walked out onto the empty stage. I was nervous, but by then I'd learned how to appear calm. Herr Schmid accompanied me on the piano. Monsieur Chauvin and Dr. Dulcamara sat a few rows back to hear how my voice handled the acoustics. Only a few lamps burned, so I couldn't even see them. You may begin, Chauvin's voice boomed from the darkness. I sang the maid's aria, which suited my voice as well as anything, Madame Abendroth had said. Though you're too tall for the soubrette roles, she always added. I sang my heart out, concentrating on everything I had learned. When I finished, the sound of one person applauding filled the empty house. I imagined it was Dr. Dulcamara and not Monsieur Chauvin. I waited on the stage until both of them came up to greet me. Marvelous! Dr. Dulcamara approached first, across the bare stage, waving his hands in the air, as he did when excited. You're supporting the sound so much better now. He flashed a toothy grin. Monsieur Chauvin followed behind, frowning, looking more stooped than ever. I hadn't impressed him. Are you sure you're ready for this? He asked. Of course she's ready, Dr. Dulcamara said, taking my arm. We can proceed as planned, can't we? He squeezed my arm, hard. Yes, I said, unsure what I was agreeing to. Chauvin's eyes narrowed. She doesn't know. You haven't told her, have you? We have an agreement, Dr. Dulcamara said. You can see how hard she's worked for this. She'll be able to support it now. My stomach sank. Dulcamara's grip on my arm was so firm, I was sure he'd leave bruises. What was I missing? Come along, Lily, Dr. Dulcamara said. He turned me firmly, and we began to walk into the wings. Wait, I said, but he only walked faster, and I stumbled along beside him. Don't destroy everything we've worked for, Monsieur Chauvin called after us. The operation is far too risky. I grew cold all over, and swallowing, felt my larynx move. Meddling old fool, Dulcamara said, practically dragging me. If you trust me, you'll have the career you've always wanted. But he had lied to me. Now he meant to... Holy Mother of God, he was going to implant Rossi's larynx into me. No, I said, with all the force of my training with Madame Abendroth. I spun counterclockwise and lurched away. He pitched forward, losing his balance as he lost his grip on my arm. I ran down the stairs into my dressing room and shut and locked the door behind me. Panting, I lit a lamp with shaking hands. The gaslight illuminated all the accoutrements of my profession. My makeup kit sitting beneath the mirror. All the costumes for the role of Malene hanging on a rack, from the opulent Act 1 dress to the Act 3 plain dressing gown. Faded flowers and notes from admirers. A few photographs of me with the other cast members, the real singers. Madame Rossi's larynx had its own dressing room next to mine. But a drawing of her in full leopard makeup for the role of Nyla hung above my mirror. Nyla would be my next role in the spring. How I longed to put on the leopard headdress and sing. And sing. My hands trembled as I raised them to my throat. Chauvin would never let me sing the role with my own voice. Perhaps with Rossi's larynx I could. My breathing quickened. I sank into my chair. I closed my eyes and tried to imagine her voice coming out of my mouth. All along, I'd emulated Rossi. Could I turn down a chance to become her? The key turned in the lock. Damnation! The doctor had a key to Rossi's dressing room. It must fit my lock as well. I saw him in the mirror before I even had a chance to turn around. Ah, Lily, I thought I'd find you here. He stood in the doorway, all smiles, one arm behind his back. Can't we talk about this? I rose from the chair. I wanted to tell him I'd think about it, maybe ask a question about whether it was safe, but I knew what he'd reply. I need to talk to my mother, I said, pushing past him. He seized me and pressed a strong-smelling cloth to my face. I thought I'd suffocate. I struggled for a moment to stay conscious, tried to plead, but to no avail. He'd never intended to give me a choice. My last half-formed thought as I lost consciousness was a goodbye to everything I had ever known. I didn't expect to survive the operation. The next thing I knew, I was lying down, groggy, with a head that felt swollen as a balloon. My fingers brushed the surface of plush upholstery beneath me. The memory of what had transpired crept slowly into my consciousness, and I raised a hand to my throat. Nothing seemed amiss. I cleared my throat and hummed a soft note. No, my voice was my own. "She's awake!" my mother's voice. I opened gummy eyes to see her approach and take my hand. Monsieur Chauvin sat in a dark velvet chair at my feet. Waning light made narrow rectangles on the floor. I recognized the room. I lay stretched out upon the couch in Chauvin's office. Mother clasped my hand and kissed it and began to sob quietly. "What happened?" I asked. Monsieur Chauvin replied, "I was afraid he would try to force you. Tomasi was just arriving for a wig fitting, and I enlisted his help. When the doctor tried to carry you from the opera house, Tomasi was waiting. He overpowered the doctor and brought you here." The tenor was a big man. I could easily imagine him besting the doctor. I hoped Tomasi had punched him in that ugly grin. I wish I had done so myself. "Will the doctor be arrested?" Mother asked. "No," Chauvin replied. "I don't want to involve the police." I pushed my mother's hand away and sat up, which made me dizzy. "You knew what he was planning." I stabbed a finger in Chauvin's direction. He spread his hands. "I owe you an apology. I knew, but I had cautioned him against it. I was afraid it could damage both Madame Rossi's glorious instrument and, of course, you. I thought you wouldn't consent, and didn't expect he would force you unwilling." I sighed and sank back down upon the couch. Mother brushed my hair from my forehead. "What now?" I asked. "I'm afraid I have to let you go," Chauvin said, his brow furrowed. "I'm sorry." I clenched my hands into unladylike fists. He'd let me go, but he'd keep Dulcamara and his cursed invention because that sold tickets. "What am I to do now?" I asked. To my shame, tears welled up in my eyes. I turned my face to the wall. "Your voice is really too small for opera," Monsieur Chauvin said. He rested a hand on his chin, considering. "You might be an actress. You have a real talent for interpreting a role." "No," I replied. I'd been to the theater once and it bored me. I had no interest in people walking about on stage and gesticulating at each other, their voices unmelodic rather than soaring above a full orchestra. This was what I loved most of all, the sound I'd taken for granted for most of my life, and now I had to leave it. I began to weep in earnest. Monsieur Chauvin politely left me alone with my mother until I felt well enough to go home. It's been 10 years since I left the opera house, vowing never to return. I married a wealthy dairy farmer who was enchanted by my brief celebrity. We live in a remote mountainous province, and I never accompany him when business takes him into Vienne. The people in the village believe I was a famous singer, no matter how many times I've told them I didn't actually sing the roles. Finally, I stopped trying to explain. After many pleas, I began to sing in the parish choir. The Kapellmeister never complains that my voice is too small. Village women bring their daughters to me to teach. My studio has photographs on the wall of me in costume as the Queen of Athalan, Carlotta, and the other roles I mimed but never sang. I do my best to teach the girls what I learned from Madame Rossi and Madame Abendroth. A few of them are doing quite well. I've even begun to compose an opera of my own, though I don't know if I'll ever show it to anyone. Madame Rossi's larynx had a short career. The day after I left the opera house for good, a fire in Rossi's dressing room destroyed Dulcamara's invention. Mother discovered the fire. No one suspected that she had set it, or that she did so in order to cover up another crime. The larynx was presumed destroyed, but it actually left the opera house at the same time I did, concealed in a hat. If the key to Rossi's room fit mine, I reasoned correctly that the opposite must be true. I intended at the time to sneak out some night and bury the larynx with the rest of her where it belonged, but strange as it may sound, I can't bear to part with it. If given a choice, I think I would have ultimately rejected the surgery. The risk was too great. How ironic that even now I can't escape the lie I lived for a few months in my youth. There's Lily Bourdon, the famous singer. Sometimes I wish I hadn't been rescued. If I were going to be known as a singer anyway, regardless of anything else I ever do, shouldn't I have enjoyed a real singing career? Every now and then I close my eyes and imagine her voice coming out of my mouth, and I want it more than I've ever wanted anything. Now, Mother says, the same people who crowded the opera house to hear Madame Rossi's larynx say that what the doctor did was monstrous and should never have been permitted. Monsieur Chauvin died of pneumonia that winter, and the new director insists that anyone performing a role must be alive and intact. Dr. Dolcamara left the country, and the last anyone heard, he was working on an invention he called an extra lung for singers to tap into when they ran out of breath. I keep the larynx in a mahogany jewelry box with a decoupage photograph of Rossi on the lid. The gold leaf is mostly worn off the voice box now. Sometimes I take the miraculous relic out and hold it. I don't dare manipulate the fragile cartilages to change the pitch, but if I blow through it, the larynx still emits a faint sound like a dying whimper. For good or ill, I feel eternally linked to this remnant of my great teacher. I'll never know who I really am or who I might have become. Thank you.
That was marvelous,
Oh.
Ellen.
Bravo, bravo. Bravissimo.
Thank you so much. I was actually biting my nails during part of that because I had some idea of what was going to happen to Lily, but it was so painful watching them march toward it. And then you surprised me even after that. So very fine work. Thank you.
Oh,
We always take a breath between the stories. We usually find that we sort of need it. Well, our next reader is a name that's familiar to all the regulars. It's Daniel Marcus. Daniel is the founder and co-host of Story Hour. His fiction has appeared in many genre and literary venues, including Asimov's F&SF, Eon, Skull, Witness, and Ziziva. Some of these stories were collected in Binding Energy, described by Salon.com as a cross between Raymond Carver and William Gibson. Daniel's new short story collection, Bright Moment and Others, came out from Wordfire Press earlier this year. He is also the author of the novels Burn Rate and A Crack in Everything. He has taught fiction writing at the UC Berkeley Extension and Gotham Writers Workshop and was shortlisted for the John W. Campbell Award for Best New Writer when it was still called that. Daniel, it's exciting to have you reading tonight.
well, it's exciting to be reading again. For Ellen, thank you so much for that wonderful story. That was just so great.
And Ellen, please read the comments because sometimes we start to chat during the stories. It doesn't mean we're paying attention. In fact, it usually means we're paying very close attention. And I think you may enjoy some of them. So Daniel, I understand you've got something a little unusual for us.
I do. This story is in the collection. It first appeared in the late lamented Aeon magazine. It's a wonderful online magazine published and edited by the mother-daughter team, Bridget and Marty McKenna. And it crashed and burned quite some time ago, but during its short tenure, just produced some wonderful stories. I've never actually read this story out loud, and the structure of it really cries out to be tag teamed. So my co-host is going to read it with me. So here we go. The Dam.
In one beaker, prepare a solution of 76% sulfuric acid, 23% nitric acid, and 1% water. In another beaker, prepare a solution of 57% nitric acid and 43% sulfuric acid. Percentages are given by weight, not volume.
I was standing on the causeway that runs across the top of the dam, looking out over the reservoir. It had been raining for days, and the water was the color of milky tea. "It's good," a voice behind me said. I whirled around, nearly jumping out of my skin. It was Oscar. "Jesus, Oscar, you scared the daylights out of me." "It's good when it's like this," he said, his eyes gray and empty as the sky. A small rivulet of drool escaped from the corner of his mouth. "What's good?" I asked. "The dragon cannot live in water that is too pure," he said. He was looking through me, out across the water. Beneath his hat, dripping wet from the rain, I knew that there was a depressed concavity in his skull, as if someone had taken a tennis ball and pushed it deep into soft putty. I'd seen it. The hair there grew thick and curly. Beneath the muddy brown water, the towns slept.
10 grams of the first solution are poured into an empty beaker and placed in an ice bath.
My house is at the end of the causeway just off the road. It was originally the caretaker's house, and it sends roots down into the guts of the dam. Basement, sub-basement, sub-sub-basement. The water heavier in the air the deeper you descend until it beads on the walls in thick, fat drops. I have never been to the bottom. Levers and wheels protrude from the walls next to the rickety metal stairway that threads the levels. It's always cold down there, and always somewhere there is the slow, steady sound of water dripping into water. Sometimes I go down 3 levels, 4 levels, and turn one of the wheels at random, pause, cock my head to listen. It is there, just at the threshold of perception, the sound of great forces being set into motion.
Add 10 grams of toluene and stir for several minutes.
Last night, there was an incredible aurora display, gaudy neon curtains rippling across the sky in a cosmic breeze. It went on for hours. The last time it was this good was a couple of years ago. A scientist from back east stopped the night at the Broken Nail, and a cluster of people gathered around him in the tavern, pumping him for news. But all he wanted to talk about was the aurora. "Ionization in the upper atmosphere," he said. Later that night, Billy, who used to run the gas station, killed him for his radio. For months afterwards, he wore the man's teeth on a necklace whenever he showed up in town, but somebody must have talked to him because he stopped. I asked him about it once. It was Saturday and the farmer's market was in town. Billy was holding a head of cabbage in one hand, lifting it to the light like it was a skull, and he Hamlet. "Where's your necklace, Billy?" I asked. He looked at me. "Ionization in the upper atmosphere," he said, and wandered off, laughing.
Remove the beaker from the ice bag and gently heat until it reaches 50 degrees centigrade. Stir constantly.
4 towns were erased when the reservoir was created as a CCC project back in the 30s. Prescott, Alice, Machinery, Thor. If I had any more children, I would name them thus. Several people refused to move when the time came. An old woman living in the house her great-grandfather had built as a newly freed slave fleeing Reconstruction. A young man whose wife had died in childbirth the previous year, his daughter stillborn. An idiot. The town drunk of Machinery. I wonder if the waters rose slowly, ushering them gently into the next world, or if they looked up suddenly to see a wall of blue steel and white foam rushing down upon them higher than the trees, bearing the weight of judgment. I suspect the former. On nights when the sky is clear and the full moon hangs suspended in the sky like a cold blue lamp, the juncture between air and water fades to nothing, and the water itself becomes transparent. My boat glides along the silent surface, and I look down upon the valley as if the water were a kind of amber, freezing time to stillness. Roads, hills, stores, houses. It is a time machine, this reservoir.
50 additional grams are added from the first beaker and the mixture heated to 55 degrees centigrade. This temperature is held for the next 10 minutes. An oily liquid will begin to form on top of the acid.
I sit in my house at the edge of the causeway and monitor the level of the water. For this service, the people of the town bring me food, woven items, firewood. From time to time, Oscar wanders up from his tar paper shack behind the old train station and stands in the middle of the causeway, looking out across the water, always across the water, never the other side, never the town. Last week, I saw him there from the window of my house, standing in his usual spot. I brought him a strip of jerky and an apple and stood next to him, facing the opposite direction, down the curve of the dam and along the valley floor to the curls of smoke from town braiding into the gray sky.
After 10 or 12 minutes, the acid solution is returned to the ice bath and cooled to 45 degrees centigrade. The oily liquid will sink to the bottom of the beaker. The remaining acid solution should be drawn off using a syringe.
The residents of the sunken valley populate my dreams. A pair of school teachers, sisters, lovers, spinsters to the town of Prescott, holding each other and everything unspoken as the waters rose. A man just outside Alice who murdered his wife for the insurance money. He made it look like an accident. It was so convincing, in fact, that years later, he himself believed it. A resident of Thor who made an occasional practice of driving to neighboring towns under the still of night and killing dogs with a crossbow. He rendered the flesh from their bones and carefully reconstructed their skeletons like model airplanes in his attic. The proprietor of the Mill End store and machinery, who nursed elaborate masturbatory fantasies about raping and murdering young boys. As the years passed, the fantasies grew more and more baroque. He was active in the church community and ran the Christian Youth Fellowship's Helping Hand for Troubled Teens camp every summer. I can feel them looking up at me as my boat glides slowly through the air.
50 more grams of the first acid solution are added to the oily liquid while the temperature is slowly being raised to 83 degrees centigrade. After this temperature is reached, it is maintained for a full half hour.
Ellie Foss gave birth to a two-headed baby last week. It cleaved together at the breastbone, both heads crying in unison when it came out. A single pair of arms waved feebly in the air. Her husband, Jack, took it by the legs and slammed it against the wall. He says it's no baby of his. Ellie isn't saying much of anything. There's a lot of talk going around as they have two normal children, both obviously Jack's, since they exhibit the same pattern of delicate webbing between their toes that Jack has. Veins laced through the translucent skin like the architecture of a drunken spider.
At the end of this period, the solution is allowed to cool to 60 degrees centigrade and is held at this temperature for another full half hour. The acid is again drawn off, leaving once more the oily liquid at the bottom.
In the reservoir lives a catfish the size of a man. Massive arms sprout from its body just beneath the gills, and it uses them to move aside the debris that has been collected by the slow Atlantean drift to open the doors and enter the houses of machinery and Prescott, of Alice and Thor. I close my eyes and I can see it floating next to a colonial armoire in someone's master bedroom, reaching out a hand to touch the detailed filigree gone soft and pulpy in the cold depths, steadying itself in a sudden surge of current. Last year, some fool from one of the hill towns came down and tried to catch it. He built a raft out of the garage door and 4 empty oil drums, bolted a stout fiberglass pole onto the raft, and pushed himself off into the calm water. He used kittens for bait. Through binoculars, I saw him impale their tiny bodies on curved hooks and drop them wriggling into the water. I imagined that I could hear their sharp cries. Every now and then he'd get a hit, the pole bending like a bow, pulling that end of the raft halfway into the water. Then it would stop, and the raft would spring back and bob up and down like a cork. A small crowd gathered on the causeway to watch his progress. He was doomed, already dead, and he didn't even know it. But we did. After a long stretch of quiet, the rocking of the raft from the last hit damped to an almost imperceptible bob, and silence hanging over the lake like heat haze. Our fish burst out of the water right in front of him. It was the most beautiful thing I've ever seen, leaping into the air in a silver blur, the sun catching rainbow highlights off scales rippling like mercury. Before we had time to blink, it grabbed the man in its huge hands and pulled him into the water. The raft skidded off to the side, bobbing, bobbing. Eventually, it drifted to shore on the north side of the dam and got caught up in the branches of a fallen tree, half submerged. It's still there.
30 grams of sulfuric acid are added while the oily liquid is heated to 80 degrees centigrade. All temperature increases must be accomplished slowly and gently.
Oscar was on the causeway before dawn, looking out across the water. I brought him a heel of dark bread and some cheese. He took the items from me without a word and pushed them into his mouth. "It's mine," he said, chewing vigorously on the wad of food. Crumbs clung to his lips. "Excuse me?" He closed his eyes and swallowed, then motioned to the canteen hanging from my shoulder. I gave it to him, and he unscrewed the top and held it to his lips. His Adam's apple bobbed up and down as he swallowed. When he was done, he wiped his lips on his sleeve. "The baby is mine," he said, handing me back the canteen. I looked closely at him. Wind whistled up from the town side of the causeway, pushing between us as if reminding me of what I had to do. I returned to the house. When I looked out at the causeway again, he was gone.
Once the desired temperature is reached, 30 grams of the second acid solution are added. The temperature is raised from 80 degrees centigrade to 104 degrees centigrade and is held there for 3 hours.
I dreamed that I was in a house on the outskirts of machinery, sitting, weightless, in the living room. Tiny ceramic animals clustered together on the mantel. A grandfather clock wedged into a corner of the room emitted a muffled ticking. I floated over to the window and looked out. There, just above the level of the treetops, a small boat gliding slowly past, a lone figure rowing.
Lower the temperature of the mixture to 100 degrees centigrade and hold it there for 30 minutes.
When I awoke the next morning, there was a basket of bread and jerky on my doorstep. Underneath the lean-to next to the shed and back, a half cord of wood that hadn't been there the night before. They flayed him alive and nailed him to a telephone pole in front of the burned out shell of the First Presbyterian Church just off the town commons. I brought him some water. I set up a stepladder next to the pole and climbed with a pail and ladle up to where he hung. He'd been there all day and most of the night before, and he smelled pretty bad, blood and waste and something I couldn't identify, maybe his sorry old soul hovering nearby, waiting for an excuse to leave. An aura of flies surrounded him. His skin hung in strips. The muscles in his arms and legs were marbled with veins of yellow fat. An old scar sprawled across his shoulder, shiny runnels and bubbles like a sheet of melted plastic. "Oscar," I said, "Oscar, how about a drink?" His eyes flickered open. Imprecation, accusation, a burning grace.
The oil is removed from the acid and washed with boiling water. Stir constantly. The TNT will begin to precipitate out. Add cold water. Pellets will form.
The dragon cannot live in water that is too pure. I charged up a pair of car batteries from the generator beneath my house and wired them to a simple spring release mechanism. Took the device to the foot of the dam, looked up at the broad sweep of concrete filling the sky, colors bright like a postcard from someplace where there's an ocean. Set the timer and clambered up the side of the valley through the dense undergrowth, branches scratching at my face like flailing arms. Just as I reached the top, I heard a sound like a door slamming shut on an empty room. I turned around. A billowing gray mushroom hurtled into the sky and a network of cracks spread across the face of the dam. Water broke out in discrete gushing sprays, the cracks widening, then all at once it gave, collapsing in a churning froth of water, concrete, earth. The causeway was gone. My house hung on the blunt edge of nothing. A wall of water pushed through the valley, covering everything. Behind the advancing front, the roiling foam was a deep, rich brown. To my right, the waters receded. First, the tall steeples of churches were revealed, then the houses. Finally, the streets and roads, Prescott and machinery, Alice and Thor. They glistened, pure in the sunlight.
Note, the temperatures used in the preparation of TNT are exact. Do not rely on estimates or approximations. A good thermometer is essential. Daniel, aren't you going to read your author's note?
Oh, sure. The author, that's me, is grateful to William Powell's The Anarchist Cookbook for the TNT recipe.
Well, Daniel, I enjoyed that story, and thank you for letting me participate.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you. It was great.
That was interesting with the movement we've had through the stories tonight.
Yeah.
Apocalypses of various sizes, with perhaps some degree of recovery, but always some loss as well.
Yep.
Well, next week is also going to be excellent. This has been a great week, and next week we have Hal Y. Zhang and Tallulah J. Sullivan. Everybody, you can keep up to date about upcoming authors at storyhour2020.com, and you can watch any programs you may have missed or watch this one just as many times as you want on the Story Hour page on Facebook. Ellen, Daniel, thank you both so much for reading for us tonight. And all of you who are here, all of you who are watching later, thank you for joining us around our virtual campfire and spinning the fictive dream with us at Story Hour. Good night.
Thanks, everybody. Good night.